Another real life story, and this one is about my 11 and a half year commitment to a ministry to the marginalized people of Phillipsburg, New Jersey, and Easton, Pennsylvania, through a ministry that was called the Bridge Ministry. Fabulous effort, and it was a privilege to be part of it for 11 and a half years. Anyway, on another real life story, I talked about my 1.5 years with a band back in my, I guess, sophomore and junior years of high school. Back during the time we were playing songs by the Beatles and the Stones and the Kinks, Jimi Hendrix, Steppenwolf, The Doors, Jefferson Airplane, The Byrds, on and on, the Box Tops, Temptations, Four Tops, stuff like that. And yes, that was a very good time in my life. Excuse me. But it was time to move on. I used to go to bed with my ears ringing. I knew that my time with the realm was coming to an end when I would wake up the following morning with my ears still ringing. So anyway, that was a great experience. During college, I played music mostly by myself. I would rehearse out in the stairwell of the dorm where I lived. It had great acoustics, and I learned many, many songs out there in the stairwell. I even entered some competitions, some contests, and I won my fair share of them as a solo performer. Over the years, starting with my conversion in 1972, I would do songs, individual songs, worship songs, or other appropriate songs at churches and other Christian college gatherings. After graduating from college, I would still play mostly at churches, and there was some kind of event going on where I was the opening act, and the featured group was called Children of Light. Lynn Nelson was the leader of the Children of Light, phenomenal musician and director, orchestrator, and we had two female voices that were astounding, Lori Franson and Kim Clauder. Some of the songs that they did were originals. Some of the songs that they did were by the incredible singing group Second Chapter of Acts, which is two sisters and a brother whose voices blended phenomenally. Their first release was 1974. I believe this event with both myself and the Children of Light was 1976, I think. And following that event, Lynn Nelson was kind enough to invite me to come on board as another voice and as lead guitar for the Children of Light. I believe we did a number of concerts together, and it was again a great privilege to be part of this ministry outreach, the Children of Light. However, some of the younger kids were going off to college, so the Children of Light came to an end after about a year. One of the fascinating aspects, we also had on keyboards, besides Lynn, we had Andy, and on drums we had Martin, and I really can't remember Martin's last name right now. But Andy was going out with the lady who was working the soundboard. Her name was Debbie Legg. At some point after the group had broken up, I wanted to go see some movie. I have no idea what the movie was, and I just happened to call up Debbie to see if she might be available, because Andy was very busy. He was, I believe he was working plus going to school, and so, just as two friends, maybe we can go to this movie together. And she said yes, and I guess a year and a half later, we were married. Bye, Andy Weigart. See ya. somewhere around 1980, Debbie and I had 3 children. The first was Julie. She arrived in November of 1981. And before Julie arrived, I had started rehearsing with Lori and her husband, Russell Klein. And we rehearsed regularly, just about every week. And we actually did one concert at First Christian Assembly in Plainfield, New Jersey. And some of the music that the 3 of us did together was astounding. And I'm not much of a lead guitarist, but some of the lead breaks that I came up with on some of our songs also was surprising, amazingly good, as far as I'm concerned. I expressed in another real-life story that getting separated and divorced in 1995, I reluctantly moved out of the house and was really lost. The depression that I had struggled with for decades of my life, ever since I was in between 6 and 8 years old. I had no idea what depression was until a psychologist, Dr. Ed Linehan up in Parsippany, he diagnosed me. You have clinical, serious depression, chronic, serious depression. I had no idea, because I'd been that way for so long. I first met Dr. Linehan when I was 35. Just a few years later, my marriage was coming to an end. I was deeply involved with ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics. My upbringing was crazy, to say the least. Violent, scary. And I was doing my best to try to overcome this foundation made of sand. And at some point, especially following my meltdown in Disney World, and I talk about that on another real life video. But following that, Debbie really didn't want to be married to me anymore. I believe she probably saw me as a sinking ship, and she was not going to go down with the ship. She did not want to be married, and so we wound up separating in October of 1995, and by the summer of 96, we were officially divorced. And I thought that my life and especially any Christian witness, I felt that it was over. The Lord turned me around when He had me do a solo, and actually a duet, in a Lehigh Valley-wide presentation of My Utmost for His Highest. That was astounding. And that was 1998. A few years later, I was in graduate school at Philadelphia Biblical College, Philadelphia Biblical University. And so I was taking my master's degree in Christian counseling. And my oldest daughter, Julie, I believe it was 2004, my oldest daughter, Julie, was telling me about this ministry to the homeless that she had started participating in. And they were meeting right there in Easton, Pennsylvania, which is where I had bought a townhouse for $80,000 in 1997. Julie's telling me about this ministry. It was like, hey, yeah, I'll have to check it out sometime. Well, within a couple of weeks, I was dropping off something at the post office, and as I turned the corner, a friend from a long time ago was walking into the United Methodist Church parsonage right there on 2nd Street, I believe it is. And so I parked the car and I ran after Chip DeLeon. He was walking into the parsonage of the Methodist Church. I chased him down, and indeed he was the leader of this ministry to the, quote, homeless. And he invited me to, come and play guitar, come and just watch what they're doing. And maybe sometime, you could play guitar here. And within a week or two, I was there to observe what they were doing. Not everyone who attended was homeless, but what the ministry was a worship service with music and a strong Christian message, and then a hot meal for those who are marginalized, just barely holding on to society. And yes, indeed, a handful here and there were truly homeless. It was such a privilege to play worship music, and eventually, it didn't take long, but Chip and I were the primary leaders. Craig Fox was another primary mover and shaker in the Bridge Ministry. Lives were being touched. These were people who would not feel, those who are guests were those who would not feel comfortable in a regular church service. But somehow the Bridge Ministry, they felt welcomed, they felt recognized, they felt valued. It was such a privilege. I stayed on for 11 and a half years every Wednesday. And the Methodist Church actually went under. They were not evangelizing. They were not bringing new people into their congregation, and they burned through whatever gifts that they had. And yet the pastor allowed us to keep using the basement of the church. The first couple of nights that I went to the Bridge Ministry, there was maybe 20 people sitting in the living room of the parsonage. No one lived at the parsonage, so it was available. It had a nice kitchen. Probably a year and a half of ministry at the parsonage. There was a bad rainstorm one weekend, and the roof leaked. It leaked a lot. The water came through the roof, through the attic, through the second floor, all the way down to the first floor, and the parsonage was condemned. We were invited by the pastor. The Methodist Church was still in operation at that time. He invited us to use the basement, and indeed, until the end of the Bridge Ministry, we were in the basement. Very thrilling. And oh my gosh, hold on a second. Oh, shoot. Dang it. Sorry, dear. And those of us who led the Bridge Ministry, we would rotate on giving the message. So I was deeply involved in the Bridge Ministry, and it was such a blessing for so many years. I only stopped when I moved to Colorado, and that's another story. That's another real life story that I hope to get onto video. A few years after that, a new church bought the former United Methodist Church, and after a couple of years of them allowing us to use the basement, that church no longer wanted the liability of having undesirables on their property and in their building. And so the Bridge Ministry stopped a year and a half or two after I moved to Colorado. I spent 11 and a half years there, leading with Chip and with Craig, and occasionally Craig's brother Paul would lead. And it lasted a couple years after I got to Colorado. And then Chip and Craig were involved for 15 years, weekly. What a privilege. What a joy. Thanks for listening.